I'm Andrew Schwartz, and you're listening to The Truth of the Matter, a podcast by CSIS where we break down the top policy issues of the day and talk with the people that can help us best understand what's really going on. There's a lot of confusion about what the United States did and did not destroy in its strike on Iran. There's confusion about whether the United States and Israel have set Iran's nuclear capability back and for how long. So, to understand this much, much better, we have Tom Karako, my good friend and the head of our Missile Threat Program here at CSIS. Tom, the United States leaked out yesterday to news organizations that the job is not done and that Iran was only set back a couple months, yet this morning, President Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and Secretary of State Rubio are all at NATO saying that Iran was obliterated and that they then came to the table here to make peace because they have no other choice. What do you think is really happening here as far as you can tell, and what should happen going forward?
Yeah, well, look, Andrew, you note that the uncertainty or perhaps the confusion about what is the ground truth or the underground truth in terms of what was the effect of the Fordo and other facilities of the bunker busters. And look, that's where we have to wait and see what the result was. But what there ought not to be confusion or uncertainty about is our objectives and goals. And that's, I think, where I'm a little bit concerned is that we're searching too quickly for a particular state of affairs, a ceasefire or something like that. And as a result, deprecating or diminishing clarity about the strategic goals, which is to say, one, the elimination or the degradation of the nuclear program, two, the degradation of their conventional missile and conventional military forces, and three, the degradation, if that is indeed still the stated goal of this administration and of Israel, of the Iranian regime itself. And so I think one has to ask candid questions about whether a ceasefire contributes to that or whether it impedes the realization of those goals. You know, I think there was some reporting last night about, and actually, Andrew, our colleague Emily Harding had a piece in the Washington Post about this, which is to say, hey, if we didn't finish the job in Fordo, then go back and do it again. Focus on the goal, focus on the mission, and if it means more bunker busters or it means something else, but I think it's also important not to lose sight of the other two goals, not just Fordo, not just these other things, but the degradation of the conventional military and the degradation of the regime. I think that we've got to stay focused on that.
Tom, we're in a situation here where we just don't know. The war's on pause. That's a good thing. But you point out that our strategic objectives may not have been realized. How soon will we know whether we need to go back in and do something, or is that just unknowable?
Well, I suspect that the right folks have a pretty good idea of the answer to that question. Whether they're going to make it public or not is another matter. There's been some reports about maybe some Israeli special forces on the ground or intel folks on the ground that have perhaps had answers to that. But I think however long it takes, we ought not to shirk clarity about the implementation and the execution of our goals.
And since Trump officials have pushed back on this report, it's pretty clear that they want this to be, at least for now, publicly a one and done. Does a one and done
Well, that's just it. The Israelis are fond of using the phrase mowing the grass. And, the thing about mowing the lawn is that you have to keep doing it. Hopefully that is not going to be the situation here. And that's why I think acting more decisively in the nearer term to go after those three goals as opposed to dithering and as opposed to kicking the can and frankly fooling ourselves that or believing our own propaganda in terms of what has been this triumphant success. So before you schedule the victory parade, make sure that you have something approximating victory.
Tom, it's super interesting here because people are trying to assess what damage was also done to Iran's capabilities in terms of them being able to retaliate against Israel, to be able to retaliate against the United States or Europe. What do we know about how degraded they are after a ceasefire in this 12-day war?
Well, I think the Israelis have said that this was a couple of days ago and things are moving quickly, but I think there was something like 200 launchers left. That this was some estimate, and maybe 1,500 missiles. That's a lot, and that's why I keep coming back to you. You do have to go after the political decision makers. Just sort of pushing pause is not really peace. It's just a pause, and this is why I think a ceasefire could have the unintended or perhaps at least unfortunate consequence of throwing the Iranians a lifeline when you don't want to throw them a lifeline, and it allows them to regroup and rebuild. I mean, frankly, I wish the administration was leaning on Russia with as much fervor to stop bombing Ukraine as they appear to be leaning on Israel right now to stop their counteroffensive against Iran. So here again, just the broad, grand strategic utility of a ceasefire is not always a good thing.
Brett Stevens in the New York Times says today that he thinks the Israelis feel like if they haven't accomplished 100% of their goals, they've accomplished 80% of them. President Trump feels like he's accomplished a goal. But what is the danger of walking away from this now? Because if they're 80% degraded and that 20% is still an awful lot, you just pointed out they have a lot of missile launchers. They have 1,500 missiles left. Why is it not in the United States' interest to really finish the job here?
Yeah, and I think it is. The danger, of course, is that you have a wounded animal that will come back with a vengeance later. It's not as if the Iranians have not already been coming at their neighbors with a vengeance for the past 40 years. Israel and the United States and other folks in the region as well. But again, fundamentally throwing the regime a lifeline and giving them time to regroup and work with Russia and all this sort of stuff. I find it hard to believe that they're at the 80% mark. Again, in terms of the conventional force, in terms of the integrity of the regime, and in terms of, even in terms of the nuclear program. I think that would be a very optimistic metric in terms of the success thus far. So, there's a lot of other things that could be targeted, and a lot of other things that could be dismantled in the near term. And so I say give that effort a chance.
Tom, many Americans are asking, is Iran really a threat to the United States? Can you explain whether you think it's a threat? And if so, what is the threat?
Yeah, well, I would say it's not merely a threat, at minimum, a conventional missile threat, an asymmetric terrorist threat, and the use of proxies. I mean, just look at the last couple years. I mean, October 7 changed the world in terms of Israel's posture to the Middle East, but I mean, look at the Houthi problem and look at how that has metastasized and festered, and in some respects gotten worse in terms of the quote-unquote Houthi missile capabilities, in terms of their harassing of the global economy going through the strait. And so all of those things are a big deal. And I'll just say Iran and its manifold aspects of nefarious behavior has just been a giant cost imposition upon the United States over the many years. And so it's not just been a conventional missile threat as a potential, but it's just been a boil under our saddle on a day-to-day basis.
As Iran uses its arsenal, how do they replace it?
Well, look, they have the most active and the largest ballistic missile program in the Middle East. It's interesting and intriguing, but also unclear, I think, just how much Israel has been able to degrade their missile production facility. So that's actually, I think, a really important open question.
Right, because that was a very big part of Israel's mission here, was to degrade their missile program, not just to degrade their nuclear program.
Yes, well, and that's just it. And I gave you a number before about the number of missiles that may be left, but I think you've also pointed to the even more important question as to their missile production capability. And so, maybe the Israelis are feeling more confident about how much they have taken apart there. But I would certainly worry about that. I would not be surprised if some of that has been hardened and buried in ways that make it a little bit harder to take apart quickly.
Tom, going back to, Israel's arsenal, Israel has expended a lot of energy. They've sustained some real damage on the ground in Israel. I think the death count in Israel is up to 30 people. In Iran, it's much higher. I think it's at 600 or so. There's been a lot of damage all around in both countries. What about Israel's capability to continue to defend itself against missiles and also to be on the offensive?
Yeah, this is a comment I made yesterday, which is that this is the other danger of a premature ceasefire, is that it kind of partakes of this, I would say, maximum patience approach that you've seen on display in terms of how it affects missile defense, which is, sitting and allowing the Iranians to regroup and then fire more missile salvos at their pleasure, which then sucks up this very scarce resource of missile defense interceptors, both the United States and also that of Israel. These are scarce resources. Neither one of us really has enough to just be sitting and engaging on the Iranians' good time of when they can construct a big missile salvo as they like. And so this is why continuing the missile defeat operations, taking apart their production and their launchers and all that's why this is a moment for missile defeat. We can't afford for this to be an ongoing duration of missile defense.
Tom, I want to close with, a statement by Rafael Grossi, who is the head of the IAEA. He said, when you look at reconstruction of the infrastructure, it's not impossible. He's talking about Iran's nuclear infrastructure. And he goes on to say, quote, this is work that Iran knows how to do. It would take some time. Okay, so do we have any sense of how much time, and do we have any sense of whether that also applies to their missile program?
Yeah, I would, going back to my analogy about the wounded animal, is they have been very active, certainly on the missile program over the many years. It's hard for me to think that they will give up that intent anytime soon. And then likewise on the nuclear front, they've been at this a while. This isn't like something they tripped over and accidentally fell into a nuclear program. And so that sort of long-standing intent is something that, in the absence of dramatically changing the regime and in terms of dramatically degrading their program, I think they're just going to get right. I think it would be reasonable to surmise that they're just going to get right back to it.
Tom, really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on with such short notice. Again, we're recording this on Wednesday morning, June 25th. Things are happening fluidly, but I really appreciate you and all of our other colleagues who jump right in and get to the bottom of the matter here. So thanks so much.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Always a pleasure.
If you enjoyed this podcast, check out our larger suite of CSIS podcasts. From Into Africa, The Asia Chessboard, China Power, AIDS 2020, The Trade Guys, Smart Women, Smart Power, and more. You can listen to them all on major streaming platforms like iTunes and Spotify. Visit csis.org/podcasts to see our full catalog.